That's why I get so heated when we start to talk about when people say like, I can't deadlift or I can't hinge because I'm worried about injury. And it's like, you should be worried about injury in your everyday life if you are not doing these things. If you are not training in a safe way for everyday life, that is when you're going to get hurt. Hey guys, and welcome back to the Thick Thighs Save Lives podcast. I'm Kelsey.
Hey guys, welcome back. Welcome back. Kelsey's got a little you're just gonna spit that out right on camera? You're just gonna spit out a used cough drop?
Sometimes I forget the cameras are going, and
You
like
can't do
I'll
that.
just do, because like in my defense, like, okay, you're like, how do you miss that a camera's going? But at the same time, I'm looking at Rachael, so I'm seeing her on my screen like I'm just talking to her, and not that also I'm also on the screen.
Well, it's okay because if anyone didn't notice, I'm here to make sure that it was pointed out. That's what I do. I tell your jokes louder.
Well, yeah, that is what you do. It's so funny. Here's the thing. So I have a bit of a cold right now, and I put a cough drop in just before we started because, I'm trying to not cough in the middle of the microphone and everything. But as I was saying the intro, I was realizing that it was taking up like the majority of my mouth, and I couldn't really like clearly enunciate around it. So I was like, this has got to go.
Small mouth plus cough drop problems. But I guess I'm not the boss of everyone. So I want to get right into it because I'm excited. I feel like I have really great stuff to say today about like some movements and like how people are going to maximize their time in the gym. And but I don't want to be the boss of everyone. So do you have anything that you need to say that's been on your mind? Maybe lift it or drop it, or do we have anything that we need to get through before we can give this good stuff?
I like that. I like that. I just have a quick thing.
Okay.
It's just a little quick, tiny thing that maybe we will, we're going to talk about some exciting stuff and some exciting movements. But I just want to say one thing that's been on my mind. Um, and we've said it almost in every podcast. So I'm just going to say it in this one. You guys just eat more protein. Like, just eat more protein. It doesn't even have to be like chicken, just more protein. Every woman that I continue to interact with and talk to, and it's just, even if they've figured out a way to live a healthy lifestyle, in the back of their mind, they have this like calorie counting, less food is more situation going on in the back of their mind. And they're hurting their muscle growth. They're hurting their bone density. Like, you are just not feeding your body what it needs. So like, if if you could just think about that this week, and like what those underlying things might be with this like eat less mentality, and just think more like, how do I get a good protein source in this week? I think it'll be a good thing for you.
Oh, I love that little tidbit of knowledge. For anyone who is following up me on my water journey, no one. I'm doing way better. Since we did the hydration episode, I just want to because I left everybody kind of like, wow, is she going to die? She might die this week. This
Is she a
is not,
raisin?
she's like a freaking camel that like she's learned to survive without water and just replaces it with cheese. But I want to just update everybody that since that episode, I have taken this so seriously and so to heart. And I've done this a couple of times, but I don't think this seriously before. I here it is. Here's my baby. It's come with me everywhere. And I will tell you that the amount that I have to pee is like super annoying. But I will also say after day 2 of this, the first 2 days I felt no different. I was like, "Oh, come on. I still have that like little headache. I'm not feeling like, my skin looks better, whatever." Um, but after the second day, like starting on the third day, I started feeling thirsty and I started seeing like a lot of like my headaches going away. And you know what? I think this is the time it's going to stick. So I am alive and kicking, everybody, in case you care. And I'm drinking more water.
You know what I'll tell you though? They do care. We've created an
Aw.
all-star community and they do care about you and your well-being. I've had a weird like kind of feelings with the internet over the last week if we just want to just random things, weird feelings with like the internet and like people just kind of being angry and hateful and like whoa. I had a video go viral of me falling down and it brought out some people that weren't in our community but and I was like, oh my god, what's happening out here. But our community that we've created over here is like a bunch of like all-star humans. I just feel lucky every day that you guys are just have made it into our lives.
It's that, and sometimes I'll say for me, sometimes I am so immersed in it that when something like a viral video or whatever happens, or where you reach like new ad audiences or whatever, I am so shocked. Like, it's so shocking to me the amount of disgusting people are on the internet. It's so cringe. I wish I could meet these people in person because I would punch them right in the face, like without, like, because that's what they deserve. I'm sorry. The only reason that they're saying it on these platforms is because they know they can't get punched in the face. And I would just take care of that for everyone.
I
I've
would
been
take
working on my punches. I know you're supposed to protect your thumbs and stuff, right in the face, because these people are just so deserving of it. And I didn't, I get to thinking like, wow, it's going really well. It's really awesome out here, because I am in our community so much. And then sometimes you get outside and you go, holy shit. But, anyways, that is neither here nor there. If you find anyone in your real life that needs a punch in the face, just do it because people are not getting enough online.
no.
This podcast does not condone violence of any kind.
We have to
Please.
have a disclaimer of this podcast does not condone violence, but I do want, can I just add one thing to that? Because
Okay.
there are different phases that you go in with things like this in your life that you feel like are injustices, or especially if they're aimed at people that you love, you generally have a different reaction than you do if they're aimed at you. For some of us, not everyone, but I find that specifically for me, and I know Rachel is that way. Like if she feels anyone attacking me, she is angry. And I'm like, listen, listen, listen. Imagine how miserable you have to be to say something like that to a complete stranger, or, it's going in the compassion route, because like at the end of the day, any person who is feeling that way in themselves and going about their life and their journey kind of spewing hate or negativity towards others is carrying something inside them that I don't even want to mess with, that like it is a tremendous amount of like hate, shame, like all of those things that like isn't imaginable. So like
Well,
that's
listen, you
that's
can
my
do the
small compassion
compassion.
add on to the punch in the face. You can be at any part of your journey, but that's just a small compassion add on.
You handle that for us. Okay? We're a team. So, the all the compassion that you have, I can count that for myself, can't I?
Yep. Yeah, you got it. You
All
got
right
it.
then.
You be
All right
you.
then. I want to do 0% compassion for that kind of behavior. Okay, so you guys, this is such a great episode. So, we have over the years done, a few like really movement specific, where we break down a movement and we talk to you about like, why and how, like the best ways to maximize these exercises in the gym, and people have found them so beneficial. So what we wanted to do with this podcast is go over what we have compiled as the 5, in our opinion, the 5 most important exercises that you can be doing in the gym and that you absolutely need to have in your fitness on a weekly, daily, like these are your foundation that everything else is built on. All of the gym stuff is built on it, and all of your life is built on it. And these are the movements that every single person, no matter your ability level, if you're first walking into the gym, these are the ones to focus on. If you've been there for 10 years, these are the ones you're still focusing on. They are the must have movements.
Yeah, I love to kind of break these down because a lot of this can seem very intimidating, especially when we go to the gym and we see all of these machines. And the default to all of that is to kind of do something that is super repetitive, which is like treadmill, elliptical, bike. Those are usually what a lot of either beginners or people who are, coming back to the gym, or that has just been your routine for so long that you are very comfortable doing. But it's really important to think about the gym as it relates to your life, and what are some of the things that you need to do in your life for health and longevity, and how is your time in the gym reflecting the life that you want to live. And when we really break that down and think about what happens with age, what's important with bone density, what's important with movement, we do have the tools to be able to move well for a long term. And as the immediate disclaimer for that, just because all of these type of movements are reflected in your everyday life, that doesn't mean that you're going to be great at them when you first start. And I don't want to skip to number 2, but it's squat, so I just have to just talk about that one because it's so well known. Is a lot of people are like, yeah, I get that your squat is a great foundational movement, but like squatting hurts my knees, or I can't properly squat, so then I will never squat again. And that example, that is just not the answer. Have some tools in place to be able to get you to move well. So we will get to those exact examples, but 5 of our favorite movements to do in the gym starts with a hinge. And
So, wait,
go ahead.
I have to say a thing about, like, to piggyback on what you were saying about, beginners with squats or people coming to the gym and saying, I'm going to avoid squats because, they make me knees hurt and stuff. When we were compiling this list, what we ended up with were, when I looked at it afterward, kind of from a different lens, they were a lot of the movements that I would say beginners steer away from because they think that these are going to be ones that are going to injure them, or they have a high level of difficulty. And so that, if they would do them wrong, they could, really hurt themselves or just look silly or whatever. But that is like backwards land. That is like opposite world, because these are the most important movements that every human being does on a regular basis. So to say you're not going to train them in your gym because you're not fit enough yet, or you don't do them to proficiency, or they're not perfected, um, or you don't have enough experience, that couldn't be more opposite. These movements, even though they might sound a little bit intimidating based on what you previously know about fitness, let us talk you out of that, because you absolutely must be hinging. You must be deadlifting, guys. And that is not like, but except you're a beginner, or except you have low back pain, or except, you're old, or, new to fitness. None of this. You should be deadlifting, the end, period. I will say that for every person, it is very, very beneficial for them to be hinging and practicing the hinge on a regular basis. So that is our first one, the hinge. Go ahead, Kelsey. You take it, girl.
You take it. Well, I think that's a super important point. So I'm glad you stopped me there. And what I want to say about deadlifting, when it comes to every person should be deadlifting, that doesn't mean you should be deadlifting your max. So when you start to talk about these movements, immediately what our brains tend to go to when it comes to fitness is like the most. It's like driving a car or being a race car driver. It's like those two things are not the same, right? Like we can drive a car on a daily basis, but we don't need to go to the speedway. So we don't need to deadlift 500 pounds, but we do need to be deadlifting and hinging on a regular basis, because you're going to need to build up those muscles, pick things up, stand up, and to work on your posterior chain. So, something that I like to, when I'm talking about your posterior chain, I'm talking about your backside. I'm talking about your hamstrings, your calves, spinal erectors. I'm talking about everything behind you. So,
Glutes.
the glutes, most important thing with when we're talking about our posterior chain is a lot of people have pain on their anterior chain, which, so like a lot of people have pain like knee pain, or knee pain is probably the most common, but they're experiencing pain in these places because of a lack of strength on the opposite side. So a lot of times, if you're experiencing a lot of like pain in your knee, or pain in your hip flexors, and we're looking at like, okay, but do you sit at a desk, 8 hours a day? You're sitting down, and then you're not working on your hamstrings at all. Of course they're going to be underdeveloped. Of course it's going to start to pull in any other direction, because everything else that we're doing, we're moving forward, right? Like we're walking, we're doing a lot of things with the front of your body, because that's where you're headed. But that's an additional reason why we constantly need to be training your posterior chain, um, and just thinking about the benefits. So you pick something off the floor, you take off to run, you jump. All of these things are really controlled by your posterior chain and the ability for it to work properly.
Yeah, and I want to mention on people that avoid hinging movements, specifically deadlifts, for a fear of lower back pain. Um, again, this is opposite land because if you have a weak posterior chain, likely you have some kind of pelvic tilt, whether that be posterior or anterior. So that means like if you see it in people, it's kind of like a flared rib and like their butt sticking way out in a big curve in their low back, or the opposite where they're like really hunched and everything is kind of like curved in the spine. But these are signs of a weak posterior chain. And so often, this is a source of people's back pain. So people are like, I have low back pain. That's why I don't deadlift. And then I don't deadlift, so I continue to have low back pain. It's like this weird, like, so again, this is not, we're not maxing out. Like, these are things that you can do with an empty barbell. These are things that you can do with a 10-pound dumbbell. I would suggest some loading only because, this is when we talk about like building up the strength and the muscles, we are going to eventually need to load you up, but it doesn't have to be anything that feels intimidating. You're just working on firing those muscles because they are so stagnant most of the day. And so, like, things that we can do that are hinge type movements that you should absolutely have in your programming, every kind of deadlift, right? We've got a million options. We've got deficit, single leg, Romanian. You could use a trap bar. Like you could do it with a kettlebell. There's so many different ways to hinge in that deadlift motion. And you can choose one that makes you feel comfortable. If a barbell is sort of uncomfortable or foreign to you, you can start with a kettlebell. And it's a really, really important movement. We also want to look at kettlebell swings for hinging, any kind of glute bridges, barbell thrusts. Those are really hot right now. They are great, especially working on, that posterior chain strength. Good mornings. I really like, for beginners, cable or banded pull throughs. It doesn't have that like weighted element that sort of can sometimes be intimidating. So you can just take a band and tie it to, rig and just pull it through so that you're getting that hinge in your hips. Obviously GHRs. And then if you did want to move on, every single Olympic lift starts with a deadlift, every single one, cleans and snatches. Like, you must start with the bar in a deadlift position. So it's so important that you develop this hinging strength.
Yeah, absolutely. And when it comes to, this is kind of the one that's on like top of mind for me, because when we think about hinging, a lot of people do go to just a deadlift. But looking at all of these other exercises, when we're talking about like good mornings, when we're talking about GHRs, when we're talking about all of these other things that might be kind of sprinkled into your programming. If you have good programming, you're hearing like, I don't know, do I hinge? Do I deadlift every week? Like, you don't have to deadlift every week, but you need to be doing hinging movements. And one of the things that's top of mind for me is for a lot of us in a modern society that are working at desks, and we're kind of rolled like forward. We have our shoulders rolled forward all the time. And a lot of these things, when it comes to hinging and looking at points of performance, we are looking at rolling your shoulders back and down, pulling them back, activating your lats, because these are all included. These are all trying to work you back into a position that your body is thriving, that is comfortable and thriving, because everything that we're doing is so forward. We really have to counteract that when we get into the gym and think about, what are some of the things that I've been doing repetitively all day? Now I'm going to continue to do them in the gym, not as much. I have to sometimes counteract some of those things in a controlled environment. That's why I get so heated when we start to talk about, when people say like, I can't deadlift or I can't hinge because I'm worried about injury. And it's like, you should be worried about injury in your everyday life if you are not doing these things. If you are not training in a safe way for everyday life, that is when you're going to get hurt.
Every single time. It's not the shot of tequila, it was the 10 beers before. I when it comes to deadlifting, I definitely think that we have well, first of all, I want to say TTSL girls, with regards to programming, on a macro level of programming, you are seeing my 5 foundational movements every single week in varying orders and in varying stimulus, loads, volume. I have these 5 foundational movements built into every single thing that my athletes do. And it's not, you're right, it's not always going to look like deadlifts, but my athletes are going to be hinging every single week in multiple forms, because when it comes to the 5 foundational movements, they need to be done on a regular basis. So you will not find a week where TTSL athletes are not hinging, because it is so integral to the health of our bodies and the balance of moving well in the long term. I just wanted to bring up really quick some common mistakes that when we see people working on their deadlift and hinging, and hopefully this is going to help sort of light bulb moment for you, so you might have a little bit to feel more confident on. We often see like a kind of a squatty hinge. It looks like people call it like a squat deadlift, where when people set up to deadlift, they set up really, really wide, like with their feet spread way too wide apart, and they're going to initiate this with a bend. That is not a true hinge. You're squatting, which is also a foundational movement. However, when we want to hinge, we want to hinge. So what you want to do when you're first initiating your hinge is not think about like sitting down, right? And like lowering your butt and bending your knees. Instead, you want to think about reaching back with your butt like towards the wall behind you, and you're going to break at your hips first, not your knees. Now, this doesn't mean you don't have like a nice athletic bend in your knee, right? That's how we do everything. We never are stiff-legged. But when you break for your deadlift, it shouldn't be your knees moving first. It should be your hips. And then your chest is going to come following it. And then your butt is going to go back towards the wall behind you. And that can really help people to get rid of that kind of squatty deadlift.
Squatty.
It's a little squatty.
Well, that is a nice segue into our second one, which is the squat. Keep in mind, when we're talking about any of the muscles involved here, these are primary muscle groups that are involved, but any of these movements are generally a full body movement. And you're going to be, sometimes when I'm squatting, I'm like, why is my hand cramping right now? Like, is it a primary muscle that it's involved? No, obviously not. But is everything still involved in some of the things that we're doing? Yes, 100%, because bracing is bracing your entire body to do a full body movement. So when it comes to squats, we're looking at glutes, quads, hamstrings, core, calves, hip flexors, adductors. Um, I said quads, right?
You said quads, I think.
Me, quad dominant, says it twice.
I know. I'm gonna use both of them, and then I'm gonna use them again, and then I'm gonna go ahead and use them more. I'm gonna shut my hamstrings completely off. Fuck those
Shut
guys.
'em up. And when that comes to primary muscle groups that are being used, we are also looking at, which is something that I brought up, is when it comes to form and technique and dominant muscle groups, you're going to need to fight the ones that look they're just looking to get involved. They're looking to get involved and take over, and they would like to be completely dominant because they're dominant muscle groups. And our job is to really make sure that we are warming up other muscle groups appropriately so that when you transition into something that your primary or your dominant muscle groups might want to take over, the other ones are just like awake and they're more ready to help. So what that looks like when you're warming up for a squat, and this is me 100%, is that I know that I'm going to do some good mornings, which goes back to the hinging. I am going to do some, for me, banded monster walks because driving your knees out is extremely important. And for me also is like a lot of mobility and opening up the hips, because when we're going to talk about some common faults here, when your hips, knees, ankles are not tracking appropriately, or you have a limited range of motion in those areas, you're going to put strain on other areas that we don't necessarily want. So when we come back to I can't squat because my knees hurt, or that something along those lines, that may be true for a period of time where you need to work up to a full depth squat. That doesn't mean that we've given up on squatting for the rest of our lives, because that is not the goal. But it may mean that you need to train this range of motion and this movement, and to get more range of motion in some of those things that you may be lacking before we hit a full depth squat.
Yeah, and not only is never squatting again not the goal, it's not even possible. Good luck getting through your life without ever squatting again. It's literally not possible. Everything that we do is easier if you can get into a full squat and you have the strength to balance and maintain yourself there. It opens up so many possibilities in what your body can do in your life. I don't want to rank my 5 because they're all so important, but I just think that the ability to get into full depth in a squat is become so underrated, and I couldn't be more a mistake for me. And then when we talk about squats, it's kinda like Bubba Gump shrimp, you know? It's like, well, you got your goblet squats, you got your back squats, you got your front squats, you got your overhead squats. Like, you can go there are so the beautiful thing about squats is that, first of all, you don't need a single thing to do them because you can go to an air squat. And the other thing is there's so many variations. Box squats is a great scale for people who are working to getting to depth. Split squats, pistols for more advanced athletes, Cossack squats, we zombie squats. Like, there's so many variations and they're all full body, and it's just the most beautiful movement. It's like a chef's kiss kind of movement because the benefits just don't stop. They're so good.
They're so good. And there are so many variations. But I want to just like I go back to like reducing knee pain and increasing mobility, and literally everything else like comes from improving your squat. But some common faults I just want to throw in there as well is like coming onto your toes when you're attempting to squat. Um, Knees caving in is really, really common, especially for women, as I uncross my legs.
Same.
Because if you're sitting down right now, I hope you also uncrossed your legs. But women, as women particularly, we tend to sit in this very narrow, cross your legs, cross your ankles type of way, which is actually not beneficial for how our hips. I mean, we're in a pretzel. Like we're just sitting in a pretzel all the time and not really in a good way. So, one of the reasons why when we start to squat and we start to see a lot of the hip, a lot of the knees go in, now some deviation in your knee path from the bottom of the squat to the top is completely fine. I've said this in a previous podcast, but internet warriors continue to think that any deviation from your knees in to out is like all bad, and it's really not. Every person's squat is going to look a little bit different. They're not going to all look the same. But we don't want our knees to be so in love that they come in and give each other a kiss every time that we're standing back up out of a squat. They need to be tracking in an outward direction or forward. That can totally vary based on your body and your anatomy, which is completely fine. But those are some of the things that we want to look for when we're thinking about how to protect our knees when we're squatting so that we stay in a healthy range.
Yeah, and if you still need some fodder for the internet heroes who are like, if you squat to full depth, you're going to break your knees and that's going to do damage to your knees. Here's the actual facts to give back just in case you need a clap back. The force of the load that you are under does not shift to your hips until you reach parallel. So, actually, the most dangerous thing that you can do to your knees is load up a bar on your back and squat shallow, because literally all of the force of any load that you have on your back is going onto your knees with no help from your hips. It does not shift to your hips until you reach parallel. So please stop talking about protecting our knees by squatting shallow, because it's opposite land again and they can't do it. Um, I just have to mention this really quick because I think this is going to be life changing to somebody, and I really, for safety of athletes, guys, when we're squatting, always, we are facing the rig. Okay, I've seen this on a number of occasions with new athletes, and I know that it is intimidating enough to think you're like doing something wrong, but this isn't just like a faux pas, it's dangerous. So you never want to be stepping out with like like a barbell or for a squat or whatever, where you're like stepping forward and then when you're re-racking it you're going backwards. I've seen this from people that are maybe a little bit new. So you always want to be facing the rig that you're squatting, backing the bar out to start, and then when you re-rack, walking forward with the bar. And of course, you're never going to squat in a Smith machine because you've been listening to this podcast for 200 episodes. So we don't need to say that we're never
We don't
it's a
need
coat
to
rack.
say we're over the Smith machine, so we're not even gonna say it. But don't use the Smith machine. Don't use the Smith machine. All right. Number 3 is press. The muscles involved for a press: pecs, delts, triceps. Obviously, a ton of others, including your core.
You have to go die to okay, well, I'll take over. Okay. All right. You're doing your best. Are you sure taking out that cough drop was your best idea that you ever had? Okay. I'll just go on without you.
Sorry, I
When
had
we're
a coughing fit.
when we're talking about pressing, this is basically anything. Just picture this can be overhead, this can be in front of you. This is just anything where you're pushing away from you. So, push ups count here, overhead presses, chest presses, dips. Again, pushing something away from you, handstand push ups, even a burpee is a press. So, these are, and I will say that a lot of people are, when they start training upper body, they are a lot more likely to start pressing than they are to start pulling, which number 3 is press, number 4 is pull. And there's a reason for that, guys. If we are all naturally stronger in the press. That's how the human body is built. If you were to walk up to something extremely heavy, like a sled, and you needed to do something with it, you needed to move it from place to place. Now she's sneezing. I can't. How can I work under these conditions? This is like Are you
I'm
serious?
muted.
Will you just shut up? Stop being sick. It's, like, so annoying for the rest of us. So if you were gonna walk up to something and heavy and it needed to be moved, you'd almost always, right, get into a position where you were gonna push it rather than try to pull it. And that's just a natural reaction for the human body. That's how our body works. We're stronger at pushing. So if you wanna get these included, um, adding these, push-ups, overhead presses, whatever, these are going to be super, super beneficial, but don't do it without number 4. That's my precursor.
Yeah, like you can't do a whole bunch of presses without a pull. And honestly, you see this is like old school gym goers, like I'm talking gym bros with like the overdeveloped chest who didn't do any pulling. So they just did a bunch of bench presses. They were like, we are pressing only, we're doing biceps. And then you see a really big lack of mobility and range of motion later in life when underdeveloped pulling muscles have drawn everything forward and then don't have even the ability to move their having your shoulders move through their full range of motion because everything has started overdeveloped and pulled so far forward. So you absolutely need to pull. A lot of times what I'll do is like if I have a workout that has a lot of pressing, at the end, I'll try and do double the pulling, which is looking like banded face pulls, like light things like that, just so I'm trying to set my shoulders back into a healthy position because it's very important to push, but it is equally as important to pull. And when you're looking at I've talked about a rounded back a lot, but it's kind of like top of mind for me because I live on this earth. And I'm looking around at people and I'm saying, like, everyone is very rounded, like a lot more than I think we would hope to be on a daily basis when it comes to working with everything in front of us and not sitting back, pulling our shoulders back, like getting those nipples all the way forward. And this, you'll practice that type of posture when you start to pull. So, when you look at common mistakes when we're doing pulls, we're looking at a rounded upper back.
No, we're talking about pushes.
What?
These are common mistakes for pushes. We're on pushes.
No, I'm on pull.
You're already but
Well,
can
we're
I
doing them together. They're like they're
Oh,
a combination situation because you can't have one
it
without
it
the
is
other.
true. It is true that you can't do one without the other, but I wish you would tell me that we were doing both at once.
Well, I'm talking
Jeez.
about pulling right now.
Well, you went off and had a coughing fit, and then you changed the whole thing, so I'm just trying to keep up over here. I'm just,
You know what? I'm
just a
just trying to
sidekick.
breathe out here.
Yeah,
But
good luck.
common mistakes when it comes to pulling is a rounded upper back, initiating with the hand and elbow, overactive traps, and flaring elbows. Now, if you don't know what overactive traps kind of looks like, what I want you to do is bring your shoulders down because I know they're up near your ears and you're looking at your overactive traps right now. You need to roll them back and down because, like, immediately when we start to pull things, again, dominant muscle groups, because of the type of things that we do on a daily basis, your traps are more likely to engage. They're ready. They're ready to take over. They're a larger muscle group than what we're talking about as far as our shoulders and back. And they're more likely than your lats to just wake up. So we need to wake the lats up all the time because they're really going to help you keep your shoulders in a healthy position. For a lot of people, and I told you I'm doing press and pull at the same time. When you're pressing, or if you
Keep
feel
up.
that you don't, you keep up. If you feel like you don't have the ability to press, or you feel like you just can't press things overhead because of the type of your current range of motion with your shoulders, it is the same thing as a squat. You may not have that ability right now. You may not have the ability to comfortably maybe put a bar or some dumbbells like from your shoulders to overhead in that position because your shoulders have not practiced that. You're not comfortable in those positions yet. But that does not mean that we just let go of our push pull. Opposite. That is something that should be worked in frequently throughout your week when we're talking about even just working in some Z presses, when we're working in um some I mean Rachel already went over some of the pressing movements, but like things like that where we're still doing some maybe like light movements, we're doing bandage, shoulder to overhead. Like these are great things to warm up with where you can start to get more comfortable working from something that is maybe a little resistant. It might not even be weight bearing, but moving it overhead.
It's funny that you said, you try to counteract over the years. You've figured out that, if you have a lot of pressing in your workout, that you try to counteract with some pulling. I have that covered for my girls on an everyday basis because their warm up for a push heavy session will always be a ton of pulling. And I've actually been asked by like our members, I've been asked by athletes before, like, it seems weird because, like, we're doing a whole bunch of face pulls to warm up for push ups. And I'm like, yep, yes, we are. Yes, we
Because
are.
she's making sure that you're going to counteract the amount of pushing that you're going to be doing next. Because guess what? Care about your shoulder health. We want to make sure that you're gaining muscle and staying healthy at the same time, which has been, I don't want to say like lost in fitness, but honestly, when we've put such a dramatic emphasis on what your body looks like and I can't even think of the words that I'm trying right now. I have like a sick brain, but here we are. When we're
Is that a
putting the
thing?
emphasis on yes, then we kind of take it away from like what's really important here. It's really important that I work all of these like maybe non-sexy muscle groups. Like no one's like, what's gonna be really sexy? Lat pull downs. Like it's not like a super like aesthetically pleasing or like, but you know what is really sexy? Being able to move your shoulders and to being able to um like move in a limitless way.
Yeah, I don't know if this is true or not because it was just on the talk, Can't really trust anything on the TikTok, but I did see like that there was a scientist who came out with this like evolutionary hypothesis about what our bodies would look like in like 300 years or whatever, continuing on this path. And I bet you can imagine the shape of the way that we are bent. It was completely changed. Yeah, it was like a huge hump neck. It
Yeah.
was a completely rounded back. And these are just such obvious and very dangerous indications of a very underdeveloped like lat area, posterior delts, rhomboids, like all of those being just like so underdeveloped and not being strong enough to hold your skeleton in the straight line that it wants to be in. Or
Well,
it,
think
yeah.
about this too. Like think about your spine first of all, and think about when you're pressing something overhead. A good press overhead has your chin tucked back. And every time I say this to athletes, I'm like, "Give me a 5 chin face." Right? Because like your bar is racked in the front rack, and what I really want you to do is push your head back, which is something that we're not doing a lot right now. As far as like our daily life and our, our habits and how I'm chomping on my cough drop now.
I mean, you're doing your best.
So here we are. It's like
I
breaking apart as I'm talking and I'm like, "Oh, this
You're
is
doing your
fine."
best.
But what we really want to think about when we're talking about tucking our chin and we're pushing it back, we want to think about that alignment of the spine. And in order to do that, that's how we're pressing overhead. So we're looking at a lot of different components when it comes to working your push and pull, which is going to bring us into our last one too, which is a carry. So you're going to get a quiz at the end of this, guys. What are our favorite top 5 functional movements you need to be doing on a weekly basis? I'm not going to repeat them. You just got to know them. But
Oh,
um,
geez. I will recap for the I was I was the kind of teacher that was like, "You know what? I'm gonna give you a study guide that pretty much tells you exactly what I'm gonna ask you on the test because I'm here for us all to win, okay?" The carry is, I mean, obviously the functionality is, I think this one is probably a little bit more obvious to people than some of the others when it comes to, just what kinds of functional movements we are training for life. I mean, how much are we carrying? The load of the world, all of the tears of our dreams that once were. I mean, we're carrying a lot on a daily basis. So, when you train carrying, and again, this can be done at varying levels. We can start with farmers carries with dumbbells. We can work up to any kind of, and this is going to involve your hinge, right? Because we're gonna pick it up. But this is going to be such an important core movement, and I think people do not, obviously everybody's like, yeah, I'm going to do some crunches, I'm going to do some GHD sit-ups, I'm going to do, and that's how I'm going to get my six pack. Like, I cannot say how under fire my entire core feels when I'm doing carries. It's like no other. I can't get that from sit-ups. I can't get it from anything. The burning is it's intense.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. And there's a lot of different kinds of carries, right? We have back rack carries, we have front rack carries. We can also get some lunges in there. We have farmers carries. So there's a lot of different ways that you can do this and you can accomplish the same thing. We can accomplish that load bearing carry. Now the issue honestly with that is not the fact that it's very important or there are a number of variations. It's not sexy and it tends to be a little boring. But if I could just argue this for like a small second, is like when we're thinking about carries being boring, like how boring is it to like be on the treadmill for 45 minutes? Like put your headphones in for that. I'm not saying you should carry for 45 minutes for sure, because honestly, you shouldn't be doing any one of these exercises for that long. But to work in some of these things that maybe are a little less sexy, but you know that they are very important is really important. So some points of performance that I want to remind you, especially for carries, because so there's a number of things on this list that feel very intimidating. And I don't think carries are one of them because people understand that I pick things up and I carry them all the time. Have you seen me carry my groceries? We all understand that. But there are proper ways to train a carry that we aren't necessarily doing in our daily lives, but you will if you train them. One of the ones that I like to call out specifically is to pack your shoulders. So when we pick something up and we kind of just pick it up, I don't want to say like lazily in our daily lives, but we're not like, tucking our core in. We're not pulling our shoulders back. When we pack our shoulders, we're packing them back and down. So we are engaging our lats, we're putting our core on, we are putting our shoulders in a healthy position, and then we're putting them under load. And that's when we're talking about, things like farmers carries. But we want to pack your shoulders, straighten your back. I don't care how much load you can carry. I don't care if you're working with 35-pound dumbbells or 70-pound dumbbells. If you can't straighten your back while you're carrying, you need to be going lighter. You're going to take the next one.
Sorry, she's down for the count again. Well, we're all out here. We're doing it. We're here. You guys, gripping hard is going to increase that burn in your core. So,
I'm
you
back.
don't want to be like, well, I was just talking about hand cramping. So it's perfect that you're here because you're like cramping your hands in your back squat. But no, you do want to make sure that it's not like a light fingertip grip, because the harder that you're gripping in your carries, the more is going to be engaged throughout your whole entire core and up all the way up until your shoulders. And then definitely step lightly, right? We're not like pounding the pavement on our carries. That is an indication it's too heavy. And also, it's just not an athletic way to do anything. We're not trying to like really put a lot of stress on our joints. A shorter stride is going to give you a nice support base so that you're not having to pound so hard. So shorten your stride when you're carrying, and definitely don't crane your neck. This could go for all of them, honestly. You've got to keep your head neutral. When you're deadlifting, when you're back squatting, when we're pressing, please do not look up at the ceiling. That is not going to be putting anything in appropriate alignment. It's always a neutral gaze, just neutral. It doesn't have to be up, it doesn't have to be down. It just needs to be putting your neck into an alignment that has you looking straight ahead.
Yeah, this is particularly important when we're talking about carries because you really need to be tucked. And a lot of times, when we're doing something that may feel a little bit easier, like I pick things up and I carry them places, that's when big mistakes are made, honestly, when it comes to training in a healthy way, because we just kind of like lazily pick it up or like tilting our head to the side. And it's just like, no, we need to be tucking our chin in. We need to be packing our shoulders. We need to be engaging your core. You need to be rolling your shoulders back. And everything should be putting your spine in a nice aligned position. And I don't know how many times we say this throughout this podcast, but these are really to counteract some of the things that we're doing during the day. That's why they're so important. So it becomes more important when we really like break it down to the things that we're doing in the gym that aren't necessarily like, that's why a lot of times when I'm talking about, getting people in the gym and what are some of the things that we can do first off, and like walking is great. I like walking, and sometimes it has its place. But all of these other things are so important because you're not doing them on a daily basis. You're not doing some of them in a healthy training way. You're doing them in a way that is, I don't want to say like life or death, but you're just kind of like going through the motions. Like you're picking things up, but you're picking it up from one side. You're maybe like squatting down to pick something up, but you might be in high heels and like, not good training shoes. So you're doing it in a way that is just kind of like getting through. You're picking up your kid, you're gonna squat down, pick up your kid. It's an uneven load. They're moving all over the place. It's a whole thing. So you're doing these things in kind of a I don't want to say improperly, but you're doing them in a less controlled environment, which makes it more important to train them in a controlled environment.
So true. That is why we fitness. I mean, it's been mashed up into a million different body hating, body shaming kind of ways. But actually, why we do fitness is to be able to do life. So, having it done in a controlled environment so that you can do it in an uncontrolled environment in a safe way is everything. That's everything. So, if you are a TTSL girl, you do not need to worry about this because this is
You
being done
don't.
for you every single week. But if you are not, or if you are looking to make yourself a fitness routine or get into a routine at the gym and you're just like, I'm not sure, what should I be doing? 5 things should be present every single week of your training. Should be hinging, you should be squatting, you should be pressing, and you should be pulling, and you should be carrying. We want to make sure that those are finding their way into your training to be the best overall human being that you can be. And guess what? You're also going to look freaking awesome when you're doing that because you are going to build a ton of muscle, quicken your metabolism, and look like a damn fox. You know what I'm saying, girl?
You already do, but you're going to look like even more of a fox when you feel healthy and strong because that's where it's at. All right, what's your lift or drop?
Oh, didn't I already do it?
No.
I didn't.
No.
Oh God, I thought I did it. So then I was like,
Oh, God.
I'm lifting being more imperfect, and I'm dropping doer lift or drop this week. That's what I'm dropping.
I like it. I like it. Rachel's reaching for imperfection. That will get you on the move for sure. All right. I am lifting I'm honestly just like lifting compassion right now. I feel like it is a theme that I'm feeling. I'm lifting compassion for other people
For
and where they
us.
are.
For
Yeah, for
us. For collectively, me and you. Okay.
I'm collectively lifting our compassion
Thank
because
you.
I have this also like in my personal life. I have some like intensive care bear situations where like if I feel like anyone isn't doing the right thing for them, I feel like mad a little bit because I'm like, help me help you. But I'm trying to invoke some compassion in that so that I can really understand that everyone is going to be in the place that they're going to be in. And what I'm dropping is, you know what I'm just dropping? I'm dropping this cold weather. Can I do that?
Drop the like constant coughing and sneezing. I would appreciate if you dropped that. Oh, here she goes. Yeah. We're gonna need you to drop that.
Well, every time you make me laugh, it makes the coughing worse. Stop
I
being
mean,
so
that
damn
whooping cough.
funny.
Oh my God, that's a understatement of the century. Well, you guys, we hope you have enjoyed these 5 foundational movements. And if any of them are worrying you or you want to have us look at your movements, like, hey, can somebody look at my deadlift and see if like this hinge looks freaking on point or what? Am I way off? Get in our app, CBG Nation, post, a picture, a video, like let us know what you need for coaching cues on these because we're available in there and we've got a ton of knowledge we want to share.
It's
So have a
free.
great week. It's free.
It's free. Get in
It's
there.
so free.